Hi everyone, I want to welcome you to this year's Ungala. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight's about connectedness and community, about how we can get through this together. We hope you and your families are healthy and hanging in there during this difficult time. The COVID pandemic has changed our world, leaving tragedy and suffering in its wake, and our thoughts are with each of you and your families as you brave this storm. For communities that already faced social and financial difficulties in both Latin America and right here in New York, this pandemic has hit even harder. While violence, poverty, and a lack of access to quality education and healthcare aren't new challenges, now families aren't even able to meet the most basic needs, like feeding their children. Over the last few months, our teams throughout the region have been responding nonstop to many of the hardest hit communities, providing personal protective equipment to frontline workers, monthly packets of food for thousands of families in 8 different countries, continued online learning and tutoring for students, while integrating much-needed mental health support into all of our programs. Right here in New York City, we've donated hundreds of tablets so students can continue their remote schooling. We've continued our educational and mentorship programs online. We've provided ongoing emotional supports to students and also their families. And we're also giving cash transfers to migrant families in crisis. Thanks to your support, we've also been able to adapt our ongoing programs to meet the new realities we're facing and ensure that our health and education work continues. We've launched En Casa con Glasswing, a digital learning platform that allows us to provide programming and content to thousands of children and adolescents throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, while also keeping their families engaged through community cafes and supporting their teachers with workshops such as mindfulness. And it keeps our volunteers connected to the kids, which is so important. Now more than ever, we need to maintain a strong sense of connectedness and community, especially for those that are most isolated and impacted by the social and economic consequences of this pandemic. For those of you who haven't been able to join our efforts yet, throughout the evening you'll be able to click on the screen to contribute to reaching more children and families. We also want to share with you a quick video that was produced by the Skoll Foundation, who earlier this year selected us as a recipient of their prestigious Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship. This video illustrates the challenges we're taking on to build stronger, safer, and more prosperous communities by providing both immediate and sustained support. Thank you again so much for being part of our journey.
Voy a mostrar un poco de lo que me pasó antes de irme acá del país. Estas son las cicatrices que dejaron cuando intentaron básicamente secuestrarme y hacerme daño.
Tonight, the first 800 migrants from the Central American caravan are at America's doorstep.
Many immigrants say they're fleeing gang violence in their home countries.
Central America is the region with some of the highest rates of homicide in the world. We're literally losing our population to death, to exposure to trauma, and to migration. It's deeply disturbing to have a generation have such a sense of hopelessness. The problem that youth face in Latin America is a combination of chronic and acute exposure to violence and trauma, which is compounded with a lack of role models and the social networks and the social support systems that kids really need to thrive. In order to address that issue, we really wanted to focus on social cohesion and on the community, because that human connection is what essentially keeps us safe. Glasswing's model takes an existing public school, and in Latin America and Central America was empty between the morning and afternoon shifts and on the weekends. And it maps out all the resources that naturally exist in a public school and converts that public school into a center of community. The community schools are a safe haven that provides all kinds of learning, recreational opportunities, a place where teachers, volunteers from the community, volunteers from corporations could become active agents in transforming the entire community from the school.
We ask a lot of the corporations. We expect them to give time off of work to their employees. Caring adult is critical to any child who's growing up, especially when you consider the circumstances and the challenge that they face here.
They're trained on developing social and emotional skills and really fuel that social cohesion. They also enhance their resilience, which is really important for violence prevention.
Actualmente apoyamos a 7 centros escolares públicos, ubicados todos cerca de las plantas donde tenemos producción. Creemos que invertir en la educación de los jóvenes les da en realidad una verdadera oportunidad de salir de esos círculos de violencia acá en el país.
Aside from working in the schools, is we also work through the public health system, and we democratize access to mental health support. We train teachers who are working in the public system, nurses, doctors in hospitals and clinics to understand what trauma is and to be able to provide mental health support to their peers.
En nuestras comunidades azotadas por la violencia, la gente ya perdió la esperanza. Pero cuando llegamos nosotros, Glasswing, existe un quiebre de esa desesperanza y ellos comienzan nuevamente a creer que no han sido abandonados.
13 years ago, we started with just a couple schools in El Salvador, our headquarters. Now we're working with over 100 schools in 9 countries. And the government in El Salvador, they've asked us to be a partner.
Lo adoptamos de hecho como gobierno y lo vamos a estar impulsando, como te digo, durante, si es posible, los 5 años y extendiéndolo a más, porque funciona.
Gracias a Glasswing tuve la oportunidad de acceder a becas que jamás en mi vida imaginé. Tuve la oportunidad de conocer a personas increíbles y por eso es que regresé a ser voluntaria, porque quiero transmitir lo que yo aprendí.
Yo nunca me expresé como me expreso ahora anteriormente. Yo estuve en el club de debate, donde me enseñaron a organizar mis ideas, mis expresiones, la forma de yo comunicarme con las otras personas. Eso me ha abierto puertas totalmente en todos los lugares.
Sino que había algo más adentro, que otra persona lo vio antes de que yo lo viera, que otras personas creyeron en mí antes de yo creer en mí.
If each one of us commits to making a difference in the life of one kid, making sure that one kid believes in themselves and you hold up a mirror to them and remind them of their potential, that's how we can change the world together.
Hello everyone, my name is John Moore and I'm the chairman of the board of Glasswing International. Welcome to this virtual event, which is the culmination of our 2020 fundraising campaign. Tonight, we're honored to have with us experts and guests who will share with us their perspectives on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, not only on Latin America, but on the US as well, and in particular on migrant families, so many of whom live here in New York City. Behind me is the International High School. It's a few blocks from Union Square, it's a few blocks from where I live, and it's a school whose student population is nearly 100% composed of children from migrant families. A few years back, Glasswing partnered with the International High School to provide after-school programs in tutoring and mentoring for its students. And although the doors of the school are closed today, The needs and aspirations of those students remain open. Thanks to you, we've been able to continue that work that we now do by other means, on tablets, virtually, through technology, but it has continued. I want to thank all of the individual supporters, so many of you are at home tonight, for your support to allow us to do that. I want to thank our corporate and our foundation partners who've not only allowed us to continue with our ongoing work, but have provided us with special resources to deliver medical assistance and food supplies to thousands of families and their children who are most in need. I want to thank our team, who's worked tirelessly across 10 countries in these recent weeks and months for their amazing efforts. And also, and importantly, so importantly, our volunteers, whose ranks have grown in these recent weeks and months to extraordinary levels, always unwavering in their commitment, fulfilling the mission and service of Glasswing, the very foundation of our organization. The gala this year was canceled. It was canceled because of the obvious health risks of gathering in a single place. But the pandemic also made your support more crucial than ever. We are very close to reaching our goal of $1 million, which will allow us to continue our work in the weeks and months ahead. I ask all of you to please be generous. For those of you who have not yet given, there is time. Please give tonight. And for those of you who have already given, please consider becoming a monthly subscriber, a monthly giver. To all of you, thank you so much. We're deeply, deeply grateful for your generosity, and I assure you it will be received by those who are the greatest in need. Thank you so much.
I hope to get in the big boat to go back to Africa.
Don't ever leave me.
Hope is thing with feathers.
Hope esperanza in the future.
Hope is the place where I want to go.
Like the trick of a flickering flame of a candle, almost out.
Then growing tall out and bright, steadfast.
Hope is the person you want to know.
Hope is written.
I come into the world to love everyone.
Windmills. Life is too close to death.
Life is a roller coaster.
I want my life to be better.
Ready, set, go.
Life is like a tree full of leaves. Some of the leaves fall sometimes, but always come back.
Life is harness.
In the past few months, we have been living something that we never thought that we would, in quarantine for months, seeing our loved ones and our neighbors get sick or die, losing our jobs. And we have seen our people, people of color, being affected more than anyone else by this COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why it's important for us to talk to the experts. I want to welcome Dr. Eric Choi Peña, Director of Global Health, Northwell Health System, and Dr. Joanna Martinez, Director of Diversity and Health Equity, also Northwell Hofstra Medical Legal Partnership. Doctors, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Choi, first of all, for those of us who have not lived this close up as you have, can you please describe to us what it's been like working and spending time in the emergency rooms at hospitals?
It's definitely been something that I think for many of us that haven't worked outside of the United States is a new experience. So the level for a period of time in New York that the ERs were overwhelmed with very sick patients was striking. It was definitely, I think, a challenge for my colleagues and I to keep up with the volume.
Dr. Martinez, we see the numbers, we see the statistics. It's no surprise that people of color are most affected by this, both African Americans and Latinos. Why?
I'd like to sort of start by reminding everyone that's listening that this is not new, that this pandemic has really just unmasked or reminded us of the historical inequities that have our patients of color have faced forever. And to Dr. Choi Peña's point, I think just because the massive amount of death that we saw in such a short time, it made us all remember yet again all of the inequities that our patients of color are facing. And I think, you know, the great news is that there is lots of data and science that now really points to that the things like racism and, you know, things against Latino-speaking patients, the structural inequities, or what we in medicine or science like to call the social determinants of health, have existed for generations. And this was just yet another episode that made it very clear to us that we need societal, we need system, we need interpersonal change to make a difference.
Dr. Troy Peña, how do you see the country going forward? Everyone wants to know, when will this end? What will our new normal look like? Do we even know?
No, I think it depends on a lot of factors. I mean, we still, we're getting very promising news about vaccine development. So I do think a vaccine is part of the answer. And I do think that opening responsibly makes sense. And, one of the things that I thought was very powerful was the World Food Program just updated its estimate of people at risk of dying from starvation and malnutrition in the world. And they're expecting an excess mortality of close to 160 million people from the economic paralysis that occurred from the coronavirus. So that, I know coronavirus has killed hundreds of thousands of people, but when you think about its secondary impact, there is a very clear economic impetus that the people that are most affected by coronavirus are also most affected by this economic pause. And so it is very necessary to balance those two and to open in a responsible way.
What has been the most difficult part for you during this pandemic and dealing with COVID-19, and what has impacted you the most?
As a Latina woman who speaks Spanish, for me, it really has been being on the front lines and seeing the inequities real life at the bedside for my patients, understanding that, for them, it's deciding between food and medicine. That has been hard. Seeing patients who didn't understand the importance of the life-sustaining effects of a face mask and not wearing their face mask, and coding and dying because there wasn't enough energy put into someone speaking to someone in their native language was hard. Understanding that patients were denied enrollment into national clinical trials that could be potentially life-saving just because they didn't speak English was really hard. And thinking that, that could be my mom, that could be my sister, that could be me in the future. So for me, it was really impactful and hard to navigate seeing that firsthand.
Is there a silver lining? Is there a message of hope in all this?
So I'm an eternal optimist. The answer is always yes for me. I think that we've learned a lot in emergency preparedness, which obviously Dr. Troy Peña has helped our system in leading. I think it's reminded us that, all lives matter. It's reunited whether we needed it or not. Lots of literature around we needed a bellwether event to sort of remind us of where we are as a nation. So I think that I've seen a lot of recommitment, reignition around health equity and health disparities and what we need to do to make this nation better. I've had countless meetings in the last 7 days about what we're going to do as an institution, as a community to move us forward. I've seen testing go to communities of, with little insurance or no insurance. For the first time in a long time, I've seen us really gather together and understand that the death of one person affects us all. And this is really a public health issue that if one person is affected, everyone is affected.
Dr. Troy Peña, what about you?
Yeah, so I mean, when you look at the 2020 year to date, where we are, we've essentially we've taken three pivotal events of the 20th century and wrapped them into 1 6-month period. So we've seen the flu of 1918, we've seen the depression of the 1920s, and we've seen the social activism of the 1960s, all this year. And I really do think that challenges like this brings out the best in people and the best of our society, more so than it brings out the worst in people. And I think that we're seeing that this kind of latent exhaustion with the current status of socioeconomics, of politics. I think people are fed up, and I think that there's that impetus from within to kind of, we can make the change. 2020 is a year where we can affect change in our societies that are lasting, and that we've seen some glaring holes in our social net that I think we would not have seen as abruptly and as clearly had all of this not happened.
Dr. Troy Peña, Dr. Martinez, thank you very much.
Every crisis hits vulnerable populations hardest. When the COVID-19 pandemic reached Latin America, families that already faced poverty and lacked access to quality education and healthcare services were suddenly unable to meet even their most basic needs. In every country where we work, Glasswing International immediately mobilized to respond to these challenges. For low-wage workers or those who rely on the informal economy, official stay-at-home orders have been devastating. With no income, many families are unable to buy basic necessities.
El reto más grande o los retos que están afrontando las familias aquí en Guatemala, número uno vendría a ser el hambre. Hoy estuvimos haciendo una entrega, al igual que muchas entregas que hemos venido haciendo en las últimas semanas.
Yo no trabajo, sino que es mi esposo el que trabaja. Y ahorita por la suspensión del transporte público, él trabaja ahí, se ha visto bastante afectado. Él no ha trabajado, no ha percibido un sueldo. Estamos viviendo lo que es una escasez en todos los sentidos.
Hay muchos niños de nuestra escuela, de nuestra jornada, que seguramente están pasando situaciones difíciles y aquí, mire, todos los días tenían su comidita. Y ahora estos niños no sé cómo estarán.
Realmente lo que ustedes están haciendo se siente como un maná del cielo en este momento.
To date, Glasswing has distributed food packages to tens of thousands of families in the countries where we work. Across Latin America, schools are closed and quarantine orders are in place, creating challenges for both students and their parents.
Cuando me dieron la noticia de que no íbamos a ir ya a la escuela, me sentí muy triste.
Los chicos se han sentido un poco estresados, no están trabajando igual en sus casas, tienen mucha carga, nos han expresado. Creo que uno de los desafíos más grandes también ha sido que los padres puedan adaptarse a este contexto.
To keep students and their parents connected and engaged with our programs, Glasswing is providing online academic support and tutoring to students at our community schools. We also offer extracurricular activities through our virtual platform En Casa con Glasswing. Our goal is to get every one of our students on this virtual platform, maintaining a sense of community during this time of isolation.
Ahora que no voy a clase, me quedo en mi casa haciendo los clubes. Primero me meto a Facebook, después me meto a donde dice Casa con Glasswing. Y yo no solo hago un club, hago muchos clubes, haciendo actividades, manualidades, experimentos y otras cosas más. Me siento feliz, me siento que cada vez aprendo, aunque sea una cosita más, pero aprendo. Al ser parte de los clubes, me siento que estoy aprendiendo, me siento feliz. Me gustan los clubes porque puedo tener mi propio espacio de aprendizaje y me ayudan a aprender más. Participar en los clubes me hace sentir satisfecha porque no todos los niños tienen esta bendición y para mí esto es una bendición.
As with all of Glasswing's ongoing programs, mental health is a critical focus, especially right now during this crisis. Ongoing support is provided to parents and families through virtual mindfulness sessions and community cafés.
He estado siguiendo las sesiones de café comunitario, la página oficial de En Casa con Glasswing, el cual me ha ayudado a realizarme mejor y con ternura a la educación de mis niños.
Mi niño he visto, ¿verdad?, un cambio más en él de tranquilidad, de paz y confianza, ¿verdad?, en este proceso de pandemia que tenemos COVID-19.
Throughout Latin America, the pandemic is placing immense strain on public health systems that are already weak. Glasswing has stepped in to provide protective equipment, cleaning supplies, and respiratory equipment to healthcare workers and public hospitals.
En estos momentos de pandemia en la República Dominicana, los trabajadores de salud enfrentan una necesidad muy profunda en suministro de protección. Para abordar estos desafíos, en nuestro centro de salud hemos estado llevando alimentos e insumos de protección a cada uno de los doctores que están al frente de esta pandemia.
Even as the pandemic presents unprecedented challenges, Glasswing continues to address both ongoing and new crises, including the most recent destruction caused by Tropical Storm Amanda in the Northern Triangle, the thousands of migrants on the US-Mexico border, as well as supporting children and youth who have been recently returned to their home countries.
Creo que esta pandemia ha hecho que nos moviéramos o intentáramos de movernos lo más rápido posible para estar lo más cerca posible de nuestras comunidades y darles el apoyo que ellos necesitan.
Glasswing International has responded quickly and effectively to provide humanitarian relief to the most vulnerable populations. We remain committed to providing rapid response and sustained support throughout this global emergency and long after.
Hello, everyone. This is John Moore, the chairman of Glasswing International, and we're so grateful that you are joining us this evening. We promised that we would have some very special guests and experts with us this evening to talk about the region, and none who has been a better supporter over a very long period of time and a true expert in the region than Ambassador Jean Maines. And the ambassador is presently the civilian deputy to the commander, Southern Commander, as well as the former U.S. ambassador to El Salvador, a friend of Glasswing, and she's agreed to come and join us this evening to talk about the region and how it's doing during this very unusual and challenging time. So thank you, Ambassador, for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, John. And last year, I was able to be there in person. And so I hope next year we'll be able to do the same, but it's terrific to be here virtually with everybody who's listening.
So let me start with a question. You know, we're spread out around the world, the Glasswing supporters, and you're in the region and you work in the region. How is the region coping with the pandemic and all the associated knock-on consequences for society, for economies, for businesses?
Well, I'm working from U.S. Southern Command now, and so we work on the military relationships across 32 countries in the hemisphere. And again, the U.S. is in this hemisphere, and that's one of the big points is there's no way to separate the countries that are in Central, South America, and the Caribbean really from the United States, because what impacts one impacts us all. And so a number of the things that we're watching is even pre-COVID-19, there was a great deal of political and social instability across Central and South America. And so now you're seeing with COVID-19, it's putting additional stress on systems. So what we're watching for from U.S. Southern Command and more broadly is what that does to security in the hemisphere. So in the past, we have seen mass migrations from a number of countries that Glasswing works in, whether that's Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. And then you have the added situation with mass migration from Venezuela. All of that really undermines stability in the region, but it also stresses the health systems. And so what we're looking for is how that plays out on democracies. We are very fortunate in this hemisphere to be surrounded by democratic governments that share core values, freedom of speech, rule of law, but they're young democracies. And so we want to make sure that those leaders are supported and that we join forces across the US government, across NGOs, across US businesses to make sure that democracies hold in this hemisphere, because that has a huge impact on us all.
You mentioned immigration. You mentioned obviously the additional stress of COVID-19 on pre-existing trends, whether they be economic patterns of migration. Tell us how you view the role of NGOs in helping in the present moment alleviate some of those additional stresses, because our mission at Glasswing is education and health, but now we have these additional factors coming into play. What role can NGOs play? What role can Glasswing play?
Well, NGOs are a critical part, and I would say they're even more critical today in a moment like this. And why I say that is because they are really the key connectors with a community. They have the trust of the community because they're in a community day in, day out, and they develop relationships in a way that somebody, like me, who used to sit in a US embassy behind a wall, very difficult to make the kind of connection that you make as a Glasswing NGO on the ground, day to day, know the needs of people on the ground. And we rely on NGOs. We rely on NGOs for their insight. Again, we could sit in Washington or Miami, where I am now, or behind an embassy wall and develop things thinking that we're doing the right thing for a population, when in fact, you don't really know unless you have NGOs on the ground, people who are in touch with communities day in and day out. And so really delivering the type of assistance that Glasswing is doing, not only now, but what they've been doing for years, is put to the test. And I can tell you, even when we had to turn now to try and get additional assistance into countries, we turned first to NGOs because they had the connections and they had the trust of the community.
And as you think through the different types of NGOs, because there are certainly many different types of organizations that work in the region, what is the most valuable connective tissue, if you will, of the organizations? Is it infrastructure? Is it the ability to deliver supplies and resources over networks? Is it relationships within communities?
So relationships are key and the trust factor, but another factor is data. So, one of the things that I've always appreciated working with Glasswing is their ability to do both the in-person, develop the trust, but then back out of that and look at what are the systemic issues and how do you address those from a policy perspective. So, that's where we really connect with the NGOs from a US government perspective. They see the day-to-day on the ground, get the data, and then we coordinate on how do you change a policy that could get at the underlying economic conditions that are in a country, or health conditions or education conditions. How do you change the system?
As we sit here and we think about so many of these countries and neighborhoods and communities in lockdown mode, what do you worry about, both as a former ambassador and in your current role with the Southern Command, as some of the risks, greatest risks that could be brewing as a result, not only of the direct health crisis and people's health and lives, but also the impact of this long quarantine and disruption of business?
One of the challenges specifically on the economic side is about 5 out of the top 10 countries that receive remittances, so money sent from people living and working in the United States to countries in this hemisphere, the top 5 are in our neighborhood. So whether that's Honduras, Guatemala, Haiti, El Salvador, and so they've been hit twice. So you had the person in the US working who has lost their job, because the majority of migrants are in service sector jobs who've been hit the heaviest in the United States. And so they're not sending money. And then the people who receive the money have lost their job. And so from an economic perspective, that plays out on security. And so how we can stabilize and really support leaders who are leading the right way. When you look at where this hemisphere is going, there's also opportunity. It's hard to see sometimes in the midst of a crisis, but the United States is absolutely relocating supply chains. And I say relocating supply chains and not just think of, PPE, personal protective gear, or other issues just directly like that, but big supply chains are going to be moving from China to this hemisphere. And so this hemisphere should actually really benefit. And it should benefit if they address key issues on trade. So making sure that the customs systems work, making sure that the time to market works, making sure that the rule of law works. So this hemisphere could come out ahead in the medium to long term. But in the short term, there's no doubt that it's a rough road. And so it's important that leaders lead and they unite communities, build communities. It's important that all of us step up and do the right thing.
I want to thank you because you always highlight for us not only what's at stake, but some very, very practical wisdom about the institutions and the types of approaches that work, and probably most importantly, how we all need to be very integrated and collaborative. And you've certainly always done that. We miss you as ambassador in El Salvador, but we're so grateful that you continue to be a friend of Glasswing. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your support.
Absolutely, and a huge thanks to Glasswing. Thanks for the commitment to everybody who participates and all those workers on the ground. You're needed now more than ever. So it's a privilege to partner with you and know that every day you are absolutely changing lives.
It is in these extraordinary times that we meet in what can only be called a memorable event to celebrate the works of an extraordinary organization. Glasswing has inspired many of us like me to be part of their team and try to bring hope and light to the future of the youth of the world. We hope this evening inspires you as well to be part of the Glasswing team.
Amigos, soy Raúl el Gordo de Molina y quiero decirle que vamos a salir adelante de todo esto. Jóvenes que son parte de Glasswing. Quiero decirle que nos tenemos que cuidar para cuidar a nuestras familias, a nuestros padres, a nuestros hijos. Pero eventualmente todo esto va a terminar. O encuentran una vacuna o vamos a encontrar una medicina que nos ayude a superar lo que está sucediendo ahora. Pero vamos a seguir adelante como siempre lo hemos hecho. Así que fuertes y adelante, porque sí se puede.
Hi everyone, I'm Donna Karen, and I first want to take the opportunity to thank Composite and Celine for taking me on a journey that I will never forget. And first it was Guatemala, and then to Colombia. Hopefully this year it would have been Brazil, but because of this epidemic it was impossible. But my heart is there with you all. Like Glasswing, I believe that every single child in the world deserves to feel safe in mind, in body, and in spirit. The world is facing so much pain, injustice, and trauma right now. We need each other to get through this, to heal and helping others in healing. Each of us can reach out to someone and provide emotional support. Maybe it's by helping them with mindfulness, or just being there next to them, or letting them know that you care and you want to find the calm in the chaos along with them. Right now, it's about connecting, belonging, and community. It's about seeing and hearing each other, communicating with each other. Even from far away, it's about empathy. It's such an important time for each of us to take action, and we can begin today by speaking out and reaching out. God bless you all, and I truly hoped I was with you today. God bless you.
Hola, hola, yo soy Jesús de Reik, muy contento de unirme con Glasswing para saludarlos en este videíto. Yo sé que este es un momento difícil para todos, pero quiero que sepan que creemos muchísimo en ustedes y sabemos que vamos a salir bien todos de esto. Un beso bien grande, con mucho cariño.
Hi, I just want to let you know I'm so proud of all of you. And we're all in this together and we're going to get through this all together. You're not alone. Also, I want to remind you that your strength is within yourselves. Whatever you can think, you can accomplish. Never ever forget that. And I also want to congratulate Glasswing for everything you do for our community. Thank you very much. Quiero decirles que los admiro, los felicito, que estamos juntos en esto y lo vamos a superar. Que no se les olvide que la fuerza está dentro de ustedes. Dicen que Dios no nos habría dado la capacidad de soñar si no nos hubiera dado también la capacidad de hacer nuestros sueños realidad. Muchas gracias, Glasswing, por todo lo que hacen por la comunidad. Felicidades.
Hey everyone, JR Martinez here. I'm sad that we're not able to get together this year at the Glasswing Gala to celebrate the incredible work and resources that they are providing to so many. But as we've all learned, this is the year we learn to improvise. With that being said, I'm really happy to join Glasswing in their efforts to respond to the COVID crisis. These are difficult times for so many people. I understand that. This has also affected me and my family. But what I'm here to tell you is don't give up. Adversity, although in the moment doesn't feel that way, it provides an opportunity for us to learn about ourselves, a strength, a passion, an ability. That's part of the growth, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but we have nothing but time. I've been through my fair share of adversity, and I think the thing that really gets me through that adversity is focusing on the things that I'm grateful for. It's difficult, and when we're busy, it's hard to find those things. We overlook them. This is a time to reconnect with them. Trust me. But what am I doing during this time? Well, I'm writing my story, so when we get back to whatever normalcy looks like, my story will be ready to be heard and to be read. What are you doing during this time? You know, this is an opportunity for us to become survivors. But depending on the work that we do during this quiet time, that's when we become thrivers. We can impact the world together.
I'm Mati Siman, and I am the Education Program Manager for Glasswing's programs in New York City. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, we were in schools 5 days a week. We were providing in-school and after-school programming. Right now, our students are facing a lot of challenges, mostly access to basic needs, but also lack of resources to be able to continuously engage in their online learning.
I've been really having trouble trying to do my schoolwork, and in this situation, I'm recently live in a shelter that is really hard.
So today we are delivering tablets to our high school migrant youth. We're actually going to be driving around the city and personally delivering them to each student. With these tablets, we're hoping that students will not only be able to engage in their online classes, but will also be able to participate in Glasswing's virtual programs. We are continuously providing our literacy program, our mentorship program, and our career readiness program to students.
Having this tablet, I just feel really great because now I can do my work, and I have a lot of advantages with it. I'm just going to be able to do the work that I couldn't do without it.
We also recognize that we can't just help the one student, we have to help the whole family. So we are also providing weekly and monthly community workshops for parents and caregivers.
Gracias.
Glasswing is responding also by providing cash assistance through the form of prepaid gift cards, where students and their families can access basic needs, medicine, and any essential products that they may need.
Hola.
Something that we've recognized through this COVID-19 pandemic is that there's multiple barriers that widen the education gap. And we hope that through continuously providing students with this care and this attention and access to be able to virtually connect with us, we're able to mitigate that gap. We want to make sure that they feel like they have a community that cares about them and that recognizes all levels of the system that are affecting them and their ability to succeed.
Hi, everyone. We're really excited and honored to be here with Councilwoman Carlina Rivera. She's been an advocate her entire career for populations, not only populations of color, but also the elderly and other members of community that have been advocated for by this incredible woman that we get to share some time with this morning. So we're really happy to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me and for the kind words. I really am trying to represent everyone and to advocate as best I can, so that way people can know that there are people in government and City Hall fighting for them every single day.
Carlina, what have been the biggest impacts on COVID-19 affecting Latino population, people of color in New York, particularly children and young people?
Well, we've been disproportionately affected by the crisis, and I guess we can start at the federal level, right? So at the federal level, our immigrant and undocumented New Yorkers, they were left out of the stimulus package. So economically speaking, we've been devastated, and there's very, very, very little help from Washington. You've seen the leadership from the White House. It's very anti-immigrant, it's anti-Black, it's just anti-communities of color. And so we're very, very reliant on local representation. At the state level, you'll see that like $0 was allocated in the budget for families that live in public housing. So our community is dealing with challenges to access to healthy food already. Then they're living in overcrowded and unsatisfactory conditions in housing, and all of that attributes to just poor health conditions. So then on top of that is the public health crisis, and that has, the numbers in our Latino community are astronomical.
What kind of spaces can be created for more young people to step into their power as young leaders, not just for documented, but also for undocumented Latino populations, given the fear around accessing some of these services and also accessing some of these spaces that could be spaces of empowerment and where they could amplify their voices?
There are some incredible nonprofits out there that are doing great work organizing, documented and undocumented New Yorkers, and hitting the streets peacefully and really fighting for policy. And that could be organizations like Make the Road or New York Immigration Coalition. But you could also join your community board. I did that when I was very young. I thought it was a great introduction to how government works. It's very similar to how even the city council works. And for those, you don't necessarily have to run for office, but we do have, dreamers, and we have people who are representing us at different levels. So I tell people, start with an issue that you care about, and there's likely an organization there that is looking for energy, right? Because we keep fighting and you can get burnt out. And I want people to know that those organizations are out there and they need you, they need that voice. And I always tell people, your story is the most important thing, and only you can tell it. So I think, we need our nonprofits and volunteers to continue serving our neediest New Yorkers. And as your representative, as people who look to us for leadership, it's up to us to fight for budget justice and to stand by you and the work that you do. So I think funding youth programs and opportunities specifically for immigrant youth of color, that's our responsibility. I think right now the role that they're playing in feeding families, in organizing, in looking at some of the disparities we've seen, even just in like remote learning and internet access, when like 29% of New York City households don't have access to broadband internet. These are things that we should be solving so that way people have more opportunity.
Carlina, how do you envision the public schools in New York City and public education in general moving forward?
I think students should probably prepare for a fairly large shift to online learning. We can potentially create programmatic opportunity using this technology and the technology that's available, but we also have many, many challenges that come with that, right? We have students who are trying to learn that are living in shelters, that are living in temporary housing, not being able to access internet or really learn remotely at all because of the challenging conditions. So I think the disparities brought to light could change how we serve students and how we take care of faculty too, because the mental health piece for both, right? The professionals and the students, that's something that we're really gonna have to make sure that we do in the next coming weeks and months, is to fund that. But I think with more young people in this movement, they can change the way that we address the inequities, because they've led so many important movements. And I think now that I speak to more and more young people, they want the change. They can see how poor students, how students of color, how immigrant students are treated differently and have different access. They see it.
That resonates really, really well with our experience in Latin America and also in New York. In one of our schools alone, we had 175 kids who needed devices. So just like you said, actually, I think today, one of our colleagues is taking devices, tablets, to driving them and dropping them off at students' houses. And like you said, we've been working to support the parents as well. We speak with parents and provide that mental health support, because aside from the stressors and the social and economic impacts of COVID, they also become teachers essentially, or at least trying to get their kids, trying to keep their kids on track with their schooling. Thank you so much, Councilwoman Rivera, for being here with us today. We really admire your work and look forward to working together in the future for our populations in New York City.
Stay safe, take care.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to be there in person sometime soon.
Mi voz es importante porque soy única.
Mi voz es importante porque yo lucho por mi familia.
Mi voz es importante porque tengo poder.
Mi voz es importante porque tiene arte.
Porque haré el cambio. Porque con ella puedo llegar hasta el infinito y más allá.
Porque no le tengo miedo a nadie.
Mi voz es importante porque quiero hacer valer mis derechos.
Mi voz es importante porque soy diferente.
Porque soy útil.
Porque soy valiente. Mi voz es importante porque hago la indiferencia. Mi voz es importante porque soy fuerte.
Mi voz es importante porque tenemos derecho a ser escuchados.
Mi voz es importante porque valemos lo mismo.
Mi voz es importante porque soy futuro.
Hi, I'm Diego de Sola, one of Glasswing's co-founders. As you've heard today, thanks to your support and the dedication of our teams, our volunteers, and communities alike, we've been very active working with and for our youth. In these last few particularly trying months, we've been working harder than ever, on and offline, to inspire, to support, to build resilience in our communities. So since I'm the very last speaker at this very first Ungala, I get to share with you one of my very favorite things about Glasswing. So when we give, typically we're accustomed to thinking of that first direct beneficiary, the person doing the receiving. But not with Glasswing. When we support Glasswing, that first direct beneficiary is only the beginning of your impact. Take Amelia, for instance, a 14-year-old member of our lead club who is in her second year of high school in a particularly rough part of Guatemala. So, as is the case with many families around the world today, the COVID pandemic has brought on even more economic hardship to Amelia's family. But that family has something very few do. An empowered, bright-eyed, entrepreneurial young woman. So before the pandemic hit, she had been learning together with Glasswing's volunteers to make hand sanitizer. And when the quarantine was declared, she became the go-to provider of this vital substance to her whole community. So she's selling hand sanitizer at particularly affordable prices for the benefit of everyone around her, while at the same time, she's supporting her home when others are unable to do so. So our job at Glasswing is to repeat Amelia's story over and over and over again, and keep our impact rippling throughout our communities. And these ripples and the waves of hope that they create are at the very heart of what keeps us committed and motivated. So today, we invite you to keep that commitment and motivation as we continue to empower our youth and help them lead us into what we all hope for, a brighter future.